Harimi, harimi, al tirai, harimi, al tirai. Imri le'arei Yehuda, hine Elokeichem. Harimi, harimi, al tirai.
We're on Siman Pei Zayin, page 204. We're talking about a big part of the Sefer. We've been talking about Hashem's attributes that He deals with the world, His attribute of revelation, revealing Himself in shleimus, completeness, and of hiding Himself. And we talked about how the human being, not only that's how Hashem deals with the world, but it's also a reflection of the human being. Our bodies are a reflection of Hashem's attribute of hiddenness, and our souls are a reflection or come about because of Hashem's attribute of perfection and revelation. So now we're going to talk about, we think, perhaps many have thought, that the way our body and soul interacts now, that's the way it's always going to be, and that's the way it always was. We learned in Derech Hashem, I think here also, that in this world, specifically in Derech Hashem, in this world, the body is what is in primary control. We're in a physical world, we have material needs, and our body is really what's most powerful. Sometimes we get in touch with our neshama a little bit, on Shabbos, on Yontiv, when we study Torah, do mitzvos, but really, the body is what is super powerful here. So one might think that's the way it's always going to be, that's the way the interaction is going to be between body and soul, but that's not correct. In fact, based on the different times of history, of what history will be, that the way that the body and soul interact is going to change. So what the Ramchal is going to do now is talk about the different ways the body and soul could interact based on the different time, and then tie it in to the different time periods of human history. So in general, we talked about the time periods of human history are the first 6,000 years. That's what we are in now. And then after that, there's 1,000 years when the world is going to be destroyed and rebuilt. And then after that, we have what is called Olam Haba. So the Ramchal is going to talk about the ways the body interact with the soul, the different levels. He's going to have 5 levels and then break them down to 3. And then he's going to talk about how those levels correspond to different time periods in human history. So let's start. Amr Hanashama, says the soul. I get, we've talked about a lot, and I get it now, the correspondence between Hashem's attributes of revelation and the human being. Now let's talk about specifically how He guides the world in the different levels. Amr HaSeichel, says the intellect. This is what comes out first between the interaction of these two midos, between the attribute of hiddenness and the attribute of revelation. The situation the situation of completeness. That a person will be at the end of time. So at the end of days, at the end times, that's when human being will be in their complete perfection. We are not in our perfected state right now. We are not the best that we can be. But at the end, at the end of days, we will be in our complete perfection. So he's going to talk about that first. Asher yelo. V'adavar mevur ma'atzmo she'amadrega hatachlisis asher hertia sof kol iloi ha'adam hi hanikvas rishona. Now he says that the perfected state that a human being will be in at the end of time, that is actually the way the human being was created originally. How so? Because when the soul first emanated from its source, the soul, when it was first created, had to be in its complete and greatest state. So then in the end, it has the potential of getting back to that elevated state. Rather, but Hashem said to it from above, go and make yourself small. Minimize yourself. Until you return to your elevated original state through your deeds. So the way it worked is that Hashem created the soul on this super high exalted level, and then He put the soul in the body, and He said, constrict yourself, minimize yourself, until you earn to return to what the soul was based on your deeds. Now, Rav Chaim Friedlander compares this to the moon. This was something, the moon originally was the same size as the sun, which is obviously talking about in Kabbalistic terms, and Hashem made the moon smaller, and at the end of days it says the light of the moon will be again like the light of the sun. So a very similar reflected idea. Again, that's Kabbalistic terms, so don't go looking in astronomy books about this. But again, you never know.
What's created first, soul or body?
What is created first? It's a good question.
That's a good question.
What I'm saying? What do you mean nowadays? What do you mean by Adam Rishon?
No, nowadays.
Nowadays? Well, the souls are already all created.
Are we getting into an abortion debate slowly? Is that
No, the souls are, the Gemara says, are under the Kisei HaKavod, whatever that means, right? So they're not necessarily, but when is there a time when it enters into the fetus, that whole thing? Right, no, so that's complicated, yeah. But the soul is a separate thing, already existing from beforehand.
For the body, right.
The body.
Right.
yeah. But,
When they fuse is
if you want an abortion discussion, Rabbi Stort's going to give that after the class, and the halachic ramifications, which would definitely not be recorded. Okay.
No, I'm happy to record it. The main thing is that abortions and dolphins is for sure bad. That everyone agrees is bad. It's only humans that it's right?
Okay. Returning to our topic. But he says, don't think that the soul was originally created in this minimized state, via iluya marba, and that it increased after. Right? You could have thought, right now the soul is in this restricted state. One could have thought that the soul was originally created in that restrictive state, and then in the future it's going to just increase and be greater. That's not the case. Because there's nothing new under the sun. The order of this is the opposite. First, the soul came in its full force. And then it became minimized until it will return to what it was, to its greatness. Nevertheless, the end deed starts originally with thought. So the perfection of man was created at the beginning. And then it restricts in order that in order that it can go back up from what it descended to. So it can return to its shleimus. So originally Hashem created our soul that was very great in the way that it's going to be in the end of days. And then to be put in a body, Hashem told the soul, restrict yourself. Right? We talked about earlier in Daas Tevunos that if the soul now was able to shine to its full potential, our bodies bodies couldn't handle it, and we wouldn't have an evil inclination, we wouldn't have any havamina, we wouldn't have any inkling to sin. It just would be like crazy. Right? Sinning would be like, hey, you want to drink some poison? Want to drink some hemlock? You'd be, no, that's insane. Same thing. Would you want to do a sin? No, you crazy? So we wouldn't have any free will. So the soul had to reduce itself. But we're seeing that the purpose and the human being in total perfection is when the soul totally rules over the body. That's what perfection is, and that's what we are achieving and shooting towards in human history and in our lives. We're going to see that in human history the world will be transformed to a more spiritual state where the soul has total dominance, and that's what we're going to call Olam Haba. And Rabbi Vishnevsky used to point out, which I thought was a good point, not that he needs my approval, but you have certain religions where their Olam Haba is totally engaging in any physical pleasure you want. Right? That's seemingly very immature way to look what Olam Haba is. That's something a child would think. What's heaven to a child? Oh, just candy and food and playing on a jumpy thing all day. That's what some people believe. Some adults believe that their Olam Haba is. If they kill a certain amount of Jews, they're going to have a certain pleasures like that. But we don't believe that at all. It's quite the opposite. That those desires represent a human being in its incomplete form. A human being in the complete form is when the soul, our spiritual desires, rule over the body. And that's the way we're going to be transformed. Let's do a little more. Another paragraph. It's found. The perfection, the state of perfection that was set at the beginning, that's going to be in a situation, in a time period where the soul totally rules over the body. The body will have no power on the soul at all. It will be like the body doesn't exist. Because the body will be totally subjugated to the soul in its purity. Like you wouldn't even be able to like name it. It's like batal. It's like it's not even there. But it is there. Achlo shlita, but it doesn't have a power. We'll talk. Okay, he might explain it. Something. V'zep pasha. This is obvious. Ki shlitas haguf eina elach hashecha va'ofel aneshama. When the body rules over the soul, that's only darkness for this. That's only darkness for the soul. Ki harei ein inyan hagufanias ela hester ha'ara. Like we mentioned before, the body comes from and represents a hiddenness of Hashem. Umashihu mimenu ma'akev, and a little bit of the body will hold back the soul. So as much as the body rules over a person, that blocks the soul from reaching its full potential. It's impossible to have the body have any power over the soul without it limiting the light of the soul. Al-Kain, therefore, the time period when the soul is going to be in its full strength, when it won't be lacking anything that's fitting for its perfection, it has to be at the time where the body won't have any power. Al-Kain, so the soul will not have anything holding it back. So the time period when the soul will be able to totally express itself the way it was at the beginning of creation, that's going to be when the body doesn't have any power over the soul, because any time the body has power over the soul, it limits the light of the soul. Lo tamri, don't say the body won't exist at all. Because we already said, this is very important, this is something the Ramchal says many times, the reward has to be for both of them. Avol shlita lo yelo, but it won't have any power. Hashem will be after, the Hashem will be mispari mena, without separating. It can't do it by itself. Anything can't do it by itself. But it's going to be like the soul the body, is only almost like batal, is almost totally secondary to the soul. The body will be totally secondary to the soul at the point that it almost doesn't have existence. But the Ramchal is careful to point out that the body will have an existence. Now, what's the reason for this? He wrote earlier, I can't even remember sometimes what we learned in Daas, what we learned in Derech Hashem, but the Ramchal says it, that Hashem's justice is perfect. So since we serve Hashem now with our body and with our soul, it's only just that we get rewarded, our body and soul gets rewarded. So don't think that a person in Olam Haba, only his soul gets rewarded, but rather his body also gets rewarded, because when we serve Hashem now, we use our body and we use our soul. He's just pointing out that the soul will be so powerful that the body will have no control and no power over the soul at all. And it'll be like just totally secondary to the soul. It sounds like it's going to be in a different state almost, where it's perhaps almost spiritual. But the point is that it'll have an existence, meaning person will still have something called a body and will have something called a soul, but the body will have no power over the soul, and it will be totally secondary. It will be like batal.
So what stage
to the soul.
This is the last stage?
This is the last stage. This is Olam Haba.
So there's in-between stages, which is
Right.
somehow somewhat in between.
Right.
Those.
And most of the in-between stages he's going to discuss are actually either at the beginning of Olam Haba. I think if I recall correctly, within Olam Haba, the stages are going to go up and up. And that 7,000 years, after the 6,000 years, that's going to be a little lower level. We're going to find, unfortunately, spoiler alert, we're on the lowest level right now. So I hate to ruin that for everybody, not to feel depressed or anything.
When is Tchias HaMesim? Before 7,000?
Yeah, Tchias HaMesim is before the end of the 6,000. First Mashiach comes, which is still the world as we know it. Just there's not really going to be a Yetzer Hara so much. The way Rabbi Naaman explained it to me is that, we're not going to have a Yetzer Hara pushing us to sin, but we're going to still have bad habits a little bit. We need to work out. Like a person who smokes, he knows that intellectually it's bad, but it takes him a while.
Mashiach and Tchias HaMesim are going to come at the same time?
No, first Mashiach and then Tchias HaMesim.
Before the 7,000?
Right,
Yeah?
right. Yeah, so we got to get cracking. A few hundred years left.
Oh, sure.
What is it that
Pretty
world
sure.
will be destroyed for 1,000 years?
So after the resurrection of the dead, then the world's going to be. It says he's going to discuss how the world's going to be destroyed and recreated, and the tzaddikim will have wings of eagles, which is more. It's like obviously a spiritual thing. That's already in that 7,000th year. Human beings are going to be in a more spiritual form, and it's going to be different
So
type of
by
existence
world destruction means humanity is going to cease to exist.
in the form that it is now. But we're still going to exist, just in a different. Yeah. It's not like
Transhumanism.
it's not like Havdil, the rapture or something, and there's going to be like Armageddon coming from the sky and the four horsemen of the apocalypse. That we don't believe in. So
Today, there are
Okay.
people actively trying to